Jared adjusted his tie as the shuttle began its descent, the horizon of Tyvar stretching out before him. The planet's surface was a maze of silvery towers, their edges sharp and pristine, reflecting the light of 3 small, sun-like stars. He knew little of the Zelvir, only that their diplomatic reputation was as formidable as their technological advancements. The thought of walking into their domain, a lone human tasked with opening trade negotiations, would have been daunting if Jared weren't so damn good at what he did. Remember, Captain Sloane's voice crackled over the comm, these Zelvir are as cold as the ice they farm. Don't let them rattle you. They'll love me, Jared replied, half smiling at his reflection in the shuttle window. He couldn't deny the nerves rumbling under the surface, but he'd handled difficult situations before. And if all went well, he'd secure a trade partnership that would make him a hero back on Earth. The landing ramp hissed open, and Jared stepped into the Zelvir capital's air. It wasn't cold, not physically, but the atmosphere carried a certain stillness. The Zelvir delegation waited on a raised platform at the end of a long metallic walkway. They were tall and angular, their silver-blue skin shimmering faintly in the light. At the forefront was Relina. She stood out immediately, not only because she was at the center of the group, but because her gaze locked onto Jared's the moment he appeared. Her expression was unchanging, her posture perfect. Her silver hair was tied back in a series of intricate loops, and her robe-like attire glinted with woven strands of something resembling platinum. While the others around her remained statuesque, she took one step forward, her voice smooth and steady. "Welcome to Tyvar, Envoy." Jared nodded, adopting his most disarming smile. "Thank you for having me. I'm Jared Cross, Earth's trade envoy." He resisted the urge to offer his hand. He'd read that Zelvir didn't shake hands and instead gave a small bow. "I am Relina, diplomatic liaison for the Zelvir Council," she replied. "We hope this visit will be mutually beneficial." Her words were polite, but her tone was devoid of warmth. Jared knew better than to take it personally. The Zelvir prided themselves on efficiency and detachment. He was here to represent the best of humanity, its creativity, adaptability, and, if necessary, its charm. "Well, Relina," he said, "I'm looking forward to seeing how we can help each other. Shall we get started?" She gestured for him to follow, and the group moved toward a towering structure that seemed to be made entirely of reflective panels. As they walked, Relina asked, "Your journey was comfortable?" "Absolutely," Jared said. "You've got quite a view up here." Relina glanced toward the horizon. "Our architects designed the city to maximize efficiency. Every structure serves a purpose. And here I was thinking you built them just to impress the visitors," Jared joked. She didn't smile, but she did tilt her head slightly. "Impressing visitors is not a priority." "Well, consider me impressed anyway." Relina didn't reply, but she didn't dismiss him either. Jared took that as a small victory. Inside the council hall, they entered a chamber lined with panels that flickered as if alive. A circular table rose from the floor, and Relina indicated where Jared should sit. Other Zelvir filed in silently, each taking their place with military precision. "We are prepared to begin," Relina said, seating herself across from Jared. As the meeting started, Jared relied on his well-practiced diplomacy skills. He spoke clearly, outlined Earth's proposals, and made a point to acknowledge Zelvir achievements. The discussion was calm, measured, and entirely one-sided. The Zelvir rarely interjected. When they did, it was to correct a factual detail or ask a question so precise it felt more like a test. "Your offer to share agricultural data is noted," Relina said at one point, her tone flat. "However, your mention of the Kalinos strain suggests a misunderstanding. That variant is unstable and unsuitable for long-term yield optimization." Jared took a breath. "You're absolutely right. I appreciate the clarification." She nodded, the faintest hint of approval in her otherwise emotionless expression. The hours dragged on, and by the end of the session, Jared felt like he'd just completed a marathon in slow motion. As the group dispersed, Relina approached him. "You are not what I expected," she said. Jared raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Many human envoys are loud, overly emotional, impatient." "Well, I like to think I'm full of surprises," Jared said, his grin reappearing. "And what about you? Are you what I should expect from the Zelvir?" Relina blinked once, then replied, "I am an example of what our society values." Jared studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the chamber door. "Mind showing me around the city? I could use a break from all the efficiency." Relina hesitated, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jared's surprise, she said, "I will accompany you. There are certain areas designated for visitors." "Great." Jared gestured for her to lead the way, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. If he could get her to let down her guard even a little, he'd call that progress. They walked through the glistening corridors and out into the open city. Relina pointed out various landmarks, her explanations concise and technical. Jared listened, occasionally asking questions not because he needed to know, but because he wanted to keep her talking. When they reached a promenade lined with glowing sculptures, Jared stopped. These are incredible. What are they made of? An alloy unique to Tyvar. It absorbs and refracts light in a controlled pattern. And do you like them? Relina's head tilted again. They are functional. Their purpose is to mark significant historical events. But do you like them? Jared pressed. She regarded him silently for a moment before answering, I suppose they are pleasing to look at. See? That's something, Jared said, smiling. If you can find something pleasing, then you're not just a machine. You've got some humanity in you after all. I am not human, she said, her voice sharp. I know. But you've got more in common with us than you think. Relina looked at him then, her silver blue eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw, it seemed to unsettle her. She turned abruptly and gestured for him to follow. We should continue. They walked on, but the air between them felt different. Jared had touched a nerve, not maliciously, but enough to make her think. As they entered another towering building, he caught her glancing at him out of the corner of her eye. It wasn't the cold, calculating stare she'd worn at the start of the day. It was something softer, more curious. Jared wasn't sure what it meant, but he knew one thing. This mission was going to be anything but routine. The next morning, Jared met Relina at the agreed-upon location, a pristine hall situated near the heart of Tyvar's capital. The structure looked more like a crystal grown out of the ground than something constructed by hand. Sunlight refracted through the walls, casting faint, shifting patterns of light onto the floor. Jared had been told this building was a gathering place for the Zelvir's most esteemed scholars, a symbol of their commitment to knowledge and logic. It was also the only place where an outsider could gain a glimpse into their cultural history. Relina was already there, standing near a column that shimmered with the same silvery blue hue as her skin. When she saw Jared approach, she nodded once, her expression as unreadable as ever. Good morning, Jared said, his tone bright. This place is impressive. Looks like it came straight out of a science fiction movie. Relina's head tilted slightly, a gesture Jared was starting to recognize as curiosity. Science fiction? I am not familiar with the term. It's a genre of storytelling, Jared explained. Imagining what the future might look like, exploring what we could achieve, or what might happen if we ever, well, met people like you. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So you imagined us before we appeared? Not exactly you, but yeah, sort of. Humanity's always dreamed about what it might be like to find someone else out there. Another civilization, another perspective. She studied him for a moment, then turned toward the central chamber. I will show you our archives. Perhaps you will find our perspective enlightening. Jared followed her, trying to ignore the growing tension in his chest. He'd faced tough negotiations before, but Relina's detached demeanor made it difficult to tell if he was making any progress. And yet, despite her stoic exterior, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was listening more than she let on. The chamber they entered was vast and circular, with a high ceiling that seemed to hum faintly. The walls were lined with rows of crystalline panels, each glowing softly with shifting colors. Relina gestured toward a central pedestal, where a series of holographic displays blinked into existence. These are some of our historical records, she said. They include the development of our technologies, our methods of governance, and our cultural milestones. Jared walked closer, his eyes scanning the floating images. Scenes of Zelvir cities being constructed, intricate machines being assembled, and groups of Zelvir engaged in silent, orderly discussions filled the displays. It was all so clinical, efficient, as Relina might say. There were no celebrations, no displays of joy, no signs of personal connection. It was all progress and nothing but progress. Impressive, Jared said, choosing his words carefully. You've achieved so much. But he hesitated, glancing at Relina. Do you have anything that shows what life was like for ordinary Zelvir? Families, personal relationships, that sort of thing. Relina's gaze turned cold. Such records are not considered relevant to our societal advancement. Not relevant? Jared frowned. But isn't that part of what makes a civilization whole? The way people connect, the way they care for each other. She was silent for a moment, then said, Our society values efficiency and logic above all else. Emotional displays are seen as distractions. But you're not machines. Jared said, his tone softening. Your people. Sentient beings with thoughts and feelings. Isn't there room for both efficiency and connection? Relina's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Jared thought he saw something flicker behind her composed exterior. Our history has taught us that emotions can lead to instability, conflict, and failure. By suppressing them, we maintain order. Jared nodded slowly. I get that. I really do. But maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe showing a little emotion doesn't have to mean chaos. Could mean understanding. Relina turned away, her gaze fixed on the holographic displays. You speak as if your species has perfected this balance. And yet, you come to us seeking help. Perhaps it is you who have more to learn. Her words stung, but Jared didn't back down. You're not wrong, he admitted. Humanity's far from perfect. But I've seen how much stronger people can be when they work together, when they let themselves feel something. Maybe that's why I'm here, to show you that it's not a weakness. Relina didn't respond immediately. She gestured toward another section of the archive. Come, there is more to see. They spent the next hour examining various historical records, Relina explaining the significance of each one with a calm, measured tone. Jared listened carefully, but his mind kept returning to their earlier exchange. He wondered if he'd pushed too far, if he'd alienated her before he even had a chance to connect. But then, as they stood before a panel displaying a complex architectural design, Relina spoke again, her voice quieter this time. You are different from other humans I have encountered. Jared glanced at her, surprised. What do you mean? Most speak with bravado? They attempt to impress us with their accomplishments, their technology. But you ask questions. You seem more interested in understanding than in proving your worth. Jared chuckled softly. Maybe I'm just not great at bragging. Or maybe I just think understanding each other is more important than showing off. Relina's gaze lingered on him, and for a moment, Jared thought he saw the faintest trace of a smile at the corners of her mouth. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, but it was enough to give him hope. I have shown you much, she said, her tone returning to its usual evenness. Now I would like to learn more about your people. Jared blinked. You want me to tell you about Earth? Yes, she said. Not your governments or your technology. I wish to know what it is like to live as one of you. Your experiences. Jared hesitated. He hadn't expected this. Well, okay. Where do I start? Relina stepped closer, her head tilted slightly. Tell me what it is like to feel. It was such a simple question, and yet it carried so much weight. Jared took a deep breath. Feeling is complicated. It's joy and pain and everything in between. It's what makes us human. It's what drives us to create, to explore, to connect with each other. Relina watched him closely. And do you believe it is worth the instability it causes? He nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. It's what makes life meaningful. Relina looked away, her expression thoughtful. For the first time, Jared felt like he'd reached something inside her, something buried deep under layers of logic and control. He didn't know where this would lead, but he knew one thing. He wasn't just here to negotiate trade deals. He was here to bridge a gap that no treaty could ever truly close. The low hum of Tyvar's capital grew quieter as Jared and Relina moved into the lower levels of the city's archives. This part of the facility wasn't on any of the official maps Jared had been provided. The polished, mirror-like walls were replaced with textured surfaces that absorbed light, giving the space a muted, almost intimate atmosphere. For the first time since he'd arrived on Tyvar, Jared felt the weight of secrecy. What exactly are we looking for here? Jared asked, glancing sideways at Relina. Her posture was as upright as ever, but her usually placid expression carried a slight edge of concern. Relina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she continued down the narrow corridor until they reached a sealed doorway. Without a word, she touched the panel on its surface and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was smaller, dimly lit, and dominated by a central console surrounded by crystalline storage modules. Jared stepped inside, scanning the space. Okay, now I'm really starting to feel like I walked into the secret files vault. What's going on? Relina turned to him, her silver blue eyes steady but not unkind. We have encountered a problem. Problem? Jared raised an eyebrow. You're going to need to be a bit more specific. Relina gestured toward the console. During our discussions, certain anomalies were detected in the data transmissions between our trade councils. I have reason to believe that an outside faction may be attempting to interfere. Interfere? Jared frowned. You're saying someone's trying to sabotage the negotiations? Relina inclined her head slightly. It is a possibility. Why didn't you bring this up sooner? Because I was not certain of it until recently, she replied. And because I required your assistance before moving forward. Jared folded his arms, leaning back slightly. Why me? I'm just the envoy. Isn't this the kind of thing your security teams should be handling? They would act if given the directive, Relina said. However, you possess a unique perspective, an outsider's perspective. Your ability to think differently from my people may be what is needed to uncover the source of these anomalies. Jared took a moment to process that. It was the first time since his arrival that Relina had openly acknowledged his value beyond his official role. There was something almost vulnerable about the way she said it, though her expression remained composed. All right, he said finally. Let's see what we're dealing with. Relina nodded, and the two of them moved to the console. She brought up a series of encrypted data streams, each one represented by a faintly glowing line that pulsed rhythmically. As she explained the situation, Jared asked questions, each answer leading them deeper into the problem. It became clear that someone had been introducing subtle disruptions into the communication channels. Nothing overt, just enough to create confusion and erode trust between the negotiating parties. This isn't just random interference, Jared said after studying the data. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how to sow doubt. But they're not targeting just one side. They're hitting both our systems and yours. Relina nodded, her expression tense. That is why I believe it to be an external actor. Someone who benefits from discord between our peoples. Jared frowned. And if that's the case, how do we stop them? By identifying the source, Relina said. The encryption they are using is sophisticated but not impenetrable. I have already begun analyzing it. All right, let's dig in, Jared said. He pulled out his datapad and linked it to the console, scrolling through layers of code. This could take a while. Got any Zelvir coffee? Relina tilted her head. Coffee? It's a drink we have on Earth. Keeps you awake when you're working late. Though I guess you probably don't need that. We do not require stimulants, she said, her tone neutral. Our mental discipline allows us to focus without external aid. Must be nice, Jared muttered, but he couldn't help a small grin. They worked side by side for hours, trading observations and theories. Relina's technical expertise combined with Jared's unconventional approach to problem-solving began to uncover patterns in the data. Slowly but surely, they started to piece together the puzzle. At one point, as Jared leaned over the console, Relina said, "You are surprisingly adept at interpreting these sequences." Jared glanced at her. "Surprising in a good way, I hope." "It is unexpected," she said. "You approach problems differently than we do." "I take that as a compliment," Jared said, returning his attention to the code. "It's not every day I get to impress in advanced alien civilization." Relina regarded him for a moment, then said, "You have not only impressed me. You have challenged my assumptions." "Really?" Jared straightened, his curiosity piqued. "How so?" "For much of my life, I have been taught that efficiency and logic are the sole paths to progress," she said. "Your methods, while unorthodox, have demonstrated the value of creativity and intuition. I did not expect to find merit in such unstructured thinking." Jared leaned against the console, looking at her thoughtfully. "You know, I think that's the nicest thing you've said to me since I got here." Her gaze flickered downward briefly, and for the first time, she seemed almost shy. "It is not common for me to offer personal observations." "I appreciate it," Jared said, his voice softening. "And for what it's worth, I think you're pretty impressive yourself." Relina looked at him, her expert. "Ling, a breakthrough." Relina quickly turned her attention back to the screen, her tone once again professional. "This sequence, it matches a known encryption pattern used by a rogue faction operating in the Paraxis sector," she said. "If we can trace the signal to its origin point, then we'll know who's been pulling the strings," Jared finished. They both moved quickly, working together to follow the trail. The sense of camaraderie between them grew stronger as they navigated the complexities of the data. Jared could see the faint tension in Relina's posture start to ease, her movements becoming more fluid and less rigid. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, They pinpointed the source of the interference. Relina turned to Jared, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and determination. You were correct, she said. The disruptions were orchestrated by an external group attempting to undermine our negotiations. With this information, we can secure our channels and prevent further interference. Jared grinned. So we did it. Yes, she said. We did. There was a pause, and then Relina said, You have proven yourself to be more than capable. I am grateful for your assistance. Jared's grin softened into a warm smile. Anytime, Relina. I'm glad I could help. For a moment, the two of them simply stood there, the tension of the past few hours replaced by something more subtle. In the quiet of the archive, Jared felt a connection begin to form. Not just as colleagues working toward a common goal, but as individuals beginning to understand and trust each other. The council chamber was alive with activity as Jared and Relina entered. The once tense atmosphere had given way to cautious optimism, the knowledge of their success spreading quietly among the Zelvir delegates. They had managed to identify the source of the interference, seal the leaks, and restore trust between the negotiating parties. It was a moment Jared had been hoping for, though he found himself less focused on the council's reaction and more on the silent understanding he now shared with Relina. Do you believe they will proceed with the trade agreement? Relina asked as they moved toward the front of the room. Her tone was calm, but Jared could sense a faint edge of curiosity in her voice. I think they will, he replied. The Zelvir pride themselves on logic, right? It makes sense to move forward now that the interference is resolved. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the rows of delegates. Logic suggests it is the most advantageous course. Jared smirked. And what does your gut tell you? Relina glanced at him, her head tilting slightly. My gut. Intuition. A hunch. Something that's not entirely logical but still feels right. She frowned as if trying to process the concept. I do not rely on feelings to make decisions. No, of course not, Jared said with a grin. But maybe you should try it sometime. You might be surprised at how accurate a good hunch can be. Her lips parted as if she were about to retort, but then she closed them again. For a moment, her expression softened. Perhaps she said almost to herself. Before Jared could press further, a voice from the council floor called for Relina. She stepped forward, her professional demeanor snapping back into place. Jared stood off to the side, watching as she addressed the assembly. Her words were measured, precise, and carefully delivered, yet there was a subtle change in her presence, something he wouldn't have noticed before. She seemed more assured, more willing to acknowledge the human perspective she had worked so hard to understand. As the discussion progressed, Jared felt a faint pang of regret. His mission was nearly complete, and soon he'd be on his way back to Earth. He had known from the start that this was a temporary assignment, but it hadn't stopped him from forming a connection he hadn't expected. Relina had become more than just a diplomatic partner. She was someone he genuinely respected, someone who had shown him that even the coldest exterior could hide a warm, thoughtful soul. When the council adjourned for the day, Relina approached him. The council will deliberate further tomorrow, she said. But the initial response appears favorable. That's great news, Jared said, trying to sound upbeat. It means all our work paid off. Relina nodded, but her expression didn't carry the satisfaction he expected. She seemed reflective. Your contributions have been significant, she said. You have shown me a different way of thinking. I could say the same about you, Jared replied. You've taught me a lot more than I ever thought I'd learn on this trip. She hesitated as if choosing her words carefully. When you leave Tyvar, will you continue this approach with others of my kind? Jared blinked, caught off guard by the question. You mean, will I treat them the same way I treated you? Yes, she said quietly. Will you strive to understand them as you have strived to understand me? He held her gaze, then smiled. I think I will. You've shown me that there's a lot more depth to your people than the stereotype of cold logic. If I can connect with you, I can connect with others. Relina seemed to weigh his words before replying. You may be more successful than you realize. Something in her voice made Jared's heart beat a little faster. Relina, She stepped closer, and for the first time she seemed uncertain. Her usual composed demeanor had given way to something more tentative, more vulnerable. You have challenged many of my assumptions, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not know what to do with what I feel. Jared's breath caught. What do you feel? She hesitated, then said, "When you are near, I experience something unfamiliar. It is not logical. It is not orderly. But it is not unpleasant." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "Relina, it's okay to feel. It's part of who we are, human or Zelvir." Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Slowly, carefully, Jared moved closer. When their hands finally touched, her cool fingers brushed against his, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she seemed to lean into the moment, her silver blue eyes searching his face as if looking for answers she couldn't find in her data streams. "Jared," she said, her voice soft and almost hesitant. "You called me beautiful." "I meant it," he said gently. "Because you are." Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time since they met, a faint flush of color rose to her cheeks. She took another step closer, and before Jared could second-guess himself, he leaned in. Their lips met, and the kiss was light, tentative, and filled with a quiet intensity. It wasn't passion born of urgency, but rather a connection forged through shared experience and understanding. When they finally parted, Relina's gaze remained on his. "This is new." "Yeah," Jared said with a small smile. "It's new for me too." They stood there in the quiet corridor, the city humming faintly around them. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic moment, but it felt significant all the same. For Jared, it was a step towards something he couldn't yet define. For Relina, it was the first time she'd allowed herself to embrace the unfamiliar, to let go of the rigid structure that had defined her existence. "I don't know what happens next," Jared admitted, his voice soft. "Neither do I," Relina replied. "But perhaps we can discover it together." He nodded, a small, genuine smile spreading across his face. "I'd like that." They stood there a little longer before Relina finally spoke again. "You will be departing soon." "I will," Jared said, the weight of the truth settling in. "But that doesn't mean this has to end. Maybe it's just the beginning." Relina's expression softened. "Perhaps." When they finally walked away from the corridor, it was with a sense of quiet understanding. They didn't need to say more, not yet. The connection they had formed was still fragile, still untested, but it was real. And for both of them, that was enough. The air inside the archive vaults was cooler than Jared expected. The walls shimmered faintly in the low light, their reflective surfaces giving the impression of infinite depth. He stood next to Relina, who was meticulously entering commands into the console before them. They were supposed to be reviewing data from the recently signed trade agreement, but something felt off. Jared couldn't shake the sense that something or someone was watching them. "I don't like this," Jared said, his voice low. Relina glanced at him without pausing her work. "What is it you do not like?" "This place. It's too quiet. Too isolated." Relina's fingers paused over the console keys. "The vaults are secure by design. Their location ensures that sensitive information remains protected." "That's not what I mean." Jared took a step back from the console, scanning the room. "I mean, it feels like we're not alone." Relina frowned, her head tilting slightly. "Your intuition again?" "Call it whatever you want," he said. "But something isn't right." She studied him for a moment before pressing a few more keys. The console display shifted, showing a series of encrypted transmissions. "The data stream is intact. There is no evidence of interference." "Then why do I feel like we're being set up?" Jared asked. He folded his arms, leaning against the nearest wall. "What if someone knew we'd be down here? What if they're waiting for the right moment to it?" The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor, cutting him off. Both of them turned toward the source of the noise. Relina's posture stiffened, her sharp gaze fixed on the darkened entrance to the chamber. "Stay here," she said. Before Jared could argue, she was already moving toward the sound. "Yeah, no way I'm staying put," Jared muttered, following her. As they approached the corridor, the footsteps stopped. Jared and Relina exchanged a quick glance. Then, without a word, she gestured for him to wait as she rounded the corner. Jared sighed, stepping back into the shadows. He had a feeling that whatever or whoever they were about to find wouldn't go down quietly. Moments later, Relina returned, her expression guarded. "It appears we were not alone. Someone has accessed the outer layers of the archive's security network." "Great," Jared said. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means someone is attempting to retrieve classified data," she replied, moving past him back to the console. "We must block their access before they succeed." As she worked quickly at the console, Jared stayed close, his eyes scanning the entrance for any sign of movement. "And what happens if they do succeed?" Relina didn't look up. "The Council will lose trust in the security measures we implemented. It could jeopardize the entire agreement." Jared clenched his jaw. "Then let's stop them. Tell me what I can do." She hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded. "Watch the console's diagnostic display. If you see any activity spikes, let me know immediately." "Got it," he said, moving to stand next to the screen. As he watched the lines of code scroll by, he couldn't help but glance at Relina. Even now, as they faced a potential breach, her calm precision didn't waver. But Jared knew her well enough by now to see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness in her jaw. "Relina," he said quietly, "do you ever let yourself take a break? I mean, really take a break?" She didn't answer right away, her hands still moving over the console. Finally, she said, "There is no time for such indulgences when the situation requires immediate attention." "I get that," Jared said. "But once this is over, maybe we should Activity spike detected," she said suddenly, cutting him off. Her voice sharpened as she turned back to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. Jared saw the diagnostic display light up with several new indicators. "Where's it coming from?" he asked, stepping closer. Relina pointed to a cluster of symbols on the screen. "This location. It is a remote node within the outermost layer. They are attempting to bypass our safeguards. Can we shut it down?" "I am working on it," she said, her voice clipped. Jared frowned, watching the indicators flash. He wanted to help, but he knew he'd only slow her down if he tried to take over. Instead, he stayed alert, his focus on the screen. As the minutes stretched on, the lights on the console flickered, and the room seemed to grow colder. Jared glanced at Relina. "This doesn't feel right. What if they've got a backup plan?" "I am already scanning for secondary intrusion points," she said. "But if you have any intuition, now would be the time to share it." He smirked, appreciating her rare attempt at humor. "Intuition's telling me we should double-check our exit route, just in case." Relina nodded. "Agreed. I will complete the block while you ensure the pathway is clear." Jared didn't need to be told twice. He moved toward the corridor, checking each turn and intersection for any sign of movement. The stillness was unnerving. It felt like they were the only two people left in the entire facility. As he reached the main entrance to the vaults, he paused. Something glinted in the distance, just for a second. He stepped closer, squinting into the dim light. "Relina," he called back. "I think I saw." A low hum filled the air, followed by a sharp flicker of the lights. Jared turned and ran back toward the console. Relina was still there, her expression grim. "They triggered a countermeasure," she said. "They are attempting to overload the security grid. Can we stop it?" "We must isolate the affected sector," she said, her fingers racing over the keys. "If we do not act quickly, the entire system will collapse." "Tell me what to do," Jared said. Relina glanced at him, her expression softening for just a moment. "Access the secondary console and route power away from these nodes. It will slow them down." Jared nodded, moving to the console she indicated. He worked quickly, following her instructions as best he could. The room's temperature seemed to drop further, and the hum grew louder, but he focused on the task at hand. "I've rerouted the power," he said. "What now?" "Now," she said. "We block the final entry point." "Go for it," he said, watching her as she keyed in the last sequence. The hum suddenly stopped. The room fell silent, the lights stabilizing. Relina exhaled softly, stepping back from the console. Jared let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Did we get them?" he asked. Relina nodded. "Their access is blocked. The data is secure." "Good," he said. "Now can we talk about that break?" She tilted her head slightly, then gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Perhaps." Jared chuckled, leaning against the console. For the first time since they entered the vaults, he felt a sense of relief. They had done it together.